Welcome. Thank you to our friends and colleagues, Senator Durbin, Congressman Schneider, for bringing us together today to talk about the bicameral legislation that they've introduced to reduce gun violence across our nation and to recognize Gun Violence Survivors Week, the week in which the average number of American gun deaths surpass peer nations' gun deaths experiences in an entire year. Tragically, according to Everytown for Gun Safety, America's gun death rate is 13 times greater than our peer nations. Every day in the U.S. on average, 110 people are shot and killed, more than 200 people survive gunshot wounds, and countless others are traumatized by acts of gun violence. In Highland Park's case, thousands. While a statewide ban on assault weapons is now in place, thank you, Rep. Morgan and Senator Julie Morrison. And we know that it will make it that much harder for someone with horrible intentions to obtain a combat weapon. We are keenly aware that no state is an island. Gun trafficking by criminals across our state borders is a frightening reality. In the absence of a federal assault weapons ban, the Secure Firearms Storage Act is common sense legislation that respects the Second Amendment and will also keep guns out of the wrong hands, preventing them from bringing carnage to our communities. So too will the efforts behind the Keep Americans Safe Large Capacity Magazine ban, the Assault Weapons Ban, and the Default Proceed Transparency Act. For the last 7 months, we have been individually and collectively experiencing unbelievable grief. We remember and we honor the 7 individuals who were taken too soon, and we keep the more than 4 dozen injured, several of whom have joined us today, many still trying to recover physically and emotionally from these devastating and complex wounds, and their families in our thoughts. We promised them that their loss and their pain would be a catalyst to action. It's imperative that we deliver on our promise to act against the gun violence epidemic that plagues our nation. We know that the fight against gun violence doesn't end here. Thank you to our state and federal champions and all the co-sponsors of legislation designed to end this unnecessary suffering and fear. It's now my honor to introduce Senator Dick Durbin.
Thanks, Nancy. Can we ever forget the 4th of July of last year? It was a moment which will be etched in our memory. It was an extraordinary moment when people were victimized, when they just came to watch a 4th of July parade. I think it had an impact on America. We always think that the next major gun violence episode is going to be the turning point. Well, in a way, sadly, but importantly, Highland Park was a turning point in the national debate. It was a time for us to come together and finally do something. Not all I wanted, not all Brad wanted, but something to move forward, to have some sanity when it came to the use of guns in America. This week is National Gun Violence Survivors Week. It marks the approximate time each year that gun deaths in the United States surpass the number of gun deaths experienced by other countries the entire year. And we put that in perspective. More crimes of gun violence to this point in our calendar year than all the other countries in the world combined. I want it for a year. I want to offer my thanks to the survivors who bravely share their stories around this time each year, and my commitment to continue to work. We've made some significant strides in our fight to combat gun violence, such as enacting the bipartisan Safer Communities Act, the most comprehensive gun reform bill in Washington in 30 years. And here in Illinois, I want to salute the legislators and governor for their efforts, passing the Protect Illinois Communities Act, a landmark law to ban the sale of assault weapons of high-capacity magazines that have caused such devastation in Hyde Park and throughout the state. If I remember the gruesome statistics correctly, 83 rounds in 60 seconds. 83 rounds in 60 seconds. Though these actions have provided hope with our state legislation in the ongoing fight to unite against gun violence, there is so much more that needs to be done. I chair the Senate Judiciary Committee in Washington. I'm all in. We now have held 11 different hearings in the committee so far in the last 2 years since I became chair on gun violence. And we passed important new laws, though we have a lot more work to do. I'm glad to have incredible partners like Representative Brad Schneider, who joined me this week in reintroducing our Secure Firearms Storage Act. It seems so obvious. This bill would help prevent smash and grab burglaries from gun stores, which too often result in stolen guns being used later in violent crimes. You say, well, where would that happen? It happened here. In 2021, the Chicago Tribune reported on a gun that had been stolen from a Wisconsin gun store in 2016. That gun was then linked to 27 different shootings in the city of Chicago. One gun taken from a gun store. The premise of our bill is simple. If you're a gun dealer, when you close up for the night, put the guns away securely so that burglars can't steal them and use them in crime. Put them in a safe, for example. It's just common sense that would reduce gun thefts and save lives. We need Republican support for this proposal. I'm still working on it. We've had at least 55 mass shootings across the country so far this year. Nearly 4,000 people have already been killed by guns in homicides, suicides, and accidents just this year. We need to do more to reduce violence. Unfortunately, the other party in Washington continues to put forth proposals that are on the gun lobby's wish list, like the Concealed Carry Reciprocity Act that they just put in the Senate. This is one of the worst ideas. It would force Illinois to let people who are allowed to conceal carry in other states than Illinois, when they came here, they could carry by the same standard as their home state. It's a reckless measure. 20 states have virtually no standards when it comes to concealed carry. Their residents can come to Illinois and carry a gun around without any restrictions. Reckless measures like these not only put our communities at risk, they cater to the voices of the gun lobby above those of the many who suffered from trauma and loss inflicted by guns. I'm sad to say, there is an Illinois company that is marketing a gun, a .22, that is disguised as a mini AR-15 called a JR-15, Junior 15. It is being marketed in children's sizes so they can buy the gun and use it, I suppose, in some manner, even if they're kids. This notion of glorifying a military assault weapon that is responsible for so many deaths is an outrage, and the fact that it is an Illinois company is particularly galling. They emboss on the stock and barrels of these guns symbols of children that look like skeletons with pacifiers in their mouth. You think to yourself, what are they thinking, for God's sake? That is the reality of what's going on in the gun industry. Today we gather to amplify the voice of the survivors and to call for common sense and to make this a safer nation and to make our communities in Illinois safer. I'm honored to be joined in this effort by my friend, and I want to introduce Congressman Brad Schneider.
Thank you, Senator, Mayor. Thank you for your leadership, both your leadership, our colleagues, Representative Morgan, sorry, and Senator Morrison. Thank you. I am standing here very humbled to be with all the people we have here. I can't name them all, but the people who stand beside me, who are standing on the steps behind me, are the people who are out fighting day in and day out to make our communities safer, our children safer, and bring some common sense here. I'm going to talk first about Gun Violence Survivors Week, and then I'll talk about our legislation. But we marked this week, as it was already noted, is when the United States exceeds more deaths in a year than any other nation, more deaths in a month, essentially, than any other nation does in a year. Jewish tradition, I'm growing a beard. Jewish tradition says when you lose a parent, you don't shave for 30 days. That explains my beard. And the gray in my beard betrays my age. Another Jewish tradition is we name children after someone who is no longer with us. My Hebrew name Shmuel is after my uncle Sam, who was murdered in 1943. Someone walked into his office, he was a lawyer, shot him 4 times, called the police and waited for him to die. When you talk to my mother, this was 18 years before I was born, when you talk to my mother, her sisters and brother, my family, about their Uncle Sam, the pain they suffered 80 years ago is every bit as raw as today, 80 years later. That's why it's so important that we acknowledge and honor the survivors of gun violence. The anguish doesn't dissipate. The loss isn't replaced. The impact is with us forever. Highland Park joined the unfortunate club of communities impacted by that mass shooting. 640 some other communities last year had a mass shooting. 1 year, United States. More than 30 already, I think it's more than 40 already this year in the United States. Highland Park has joined communities like Buffalo, Uvalde, Monterey Park, Parkland, so many others that you just say the name of the town and you know exactly what we're talking about. This has to stop. This is completely unacceptable because the impact it has isn't just on that day, but is the rest of the life of the community. And that's why I'm so grateful for the leadership we have seen in Illinois. Representative Morgan, Senator Morrison, thank you for your leadership. In Congress, and again, Senator Durbin, we could not have done it in June, passing the Safer Communities Act without your great leadership. But I was asked, we had an event earlier this week, and I was asked by one of the people there who happened to have been here visiting their brother and sister-in-law here in Highland Park on July 4th. Said, how do you keep going? You keep running into this walls every single time. We did it after Sandy Hook. My first speech as a member of Congress was in 2013 following Sandy Hook when we thought we would get something done until the NRA successfully blocked that 5 months later. How do you keep going time and time again? I say we keep going because we have no choice. People behind me say the same thing. We are going to keep working to make our communities safer day in and day out until we achieve our goals. This week in Congress, we introduced universal background checks. We introduced legislation to ban high-capacity magazines to reduce the lethality of these shootings. We've introduced numerous bills that will hopefully make a difference in our community. And I am so pleased and honored to introduce with my fellow Illinois senator the Keep America Safe Act. I'm sorry, not the Secure Firearms Storage Act. As Senator Durbin said, this is legislation that is just basic common sense. Walk by a jewelry store late at night and you'll see a window with empty cases because they know the high value of their product is attractive to thieves. It should be no different for a gun. These crash and grab, back a truck up into the window of a gun store, the alarm goes off, and before the police even have a chance to get out of their chairs, they've grabbed the guns and are long gone. If we put those guns in a safe, if we run a rod through the guns so they can't be just swiftly taken away, we can make a difference. More than 8,000 guns last year were stolen this way. We reduce those, we save lives. If we save a life, we save the world. We need to do better. And the default proceed bill. We need to make sure that people who are seeking to buy a gun are people who are law-abiding citizens. I don't want to deny anyone's right to get a gun. If they're following the law, if they want to go hunting or target shooting, or even to protect their home. But I want to make sure those who are seeking to get a gun who shouldn't have one, the criminals, the gang members, people who are trying to pass guns on to others to commit crimes, we can do better to keep our communities safe. And that's what this legislation does. None of us can do this alone. We need to work together. But as you can see by this group standing together, we have a group willing to stand up, to speak out, and to make sure we keep fighting until we make our communities safer, our schools safer, our churches and synagogues and mosques safer, until we make our country safer, and make sure that we are defending and protecting our children for the future. It is now my honor to introduce my friend, my state senator, Judy Morrison.
the Illinois General Assembly did pass and our governor signed into law an assault weapon ban.
Thank you.
We have always known, as we know today, that this also needs to be at the federal level. This is putting good policy and public safety ahead of the gun lobby's profits, their propaganda, and their fear-mongering. And that is why I am so grateful to have Congressman Schneider's leadership, Senator Durbin's leadership, to work on this incredibly important legislative initiative, several that they talked about this morning. Gentlemen, this community stands behind you, literally, but we also stand with you and will do whatever it takes to help make this the law of the nation. It's my privilege to introduce my state representative, someone who played a significant role in our work in the General Assembly in these last few months, Representative Bob Morgan.
Thank you, Senator Morrison. Thank you, Senator Durbin, Congressman Schneider. It was an honor to be the lead sponsor of the Protect Illinois Communities Act in the Illinois House, where we stood up and we stepped up and we said enough is enough. There's enough gun violence in our state. We have to take action. And I'm very proud that we got that done and we did it together with this community as the leading force. But it's not enough. Gun violence continues to plague not just our community, not just our state, but around the country. And when people hear about gun violence, there are two types of people. There are those who sit back and say, that's all right, that's just the way of the world, that's just who our country is. Maybe I'll put an AR-15 pin on my jacket. And then there are those who demand action. Moms, for instance, who demand action. And there are legislators who demand action, like my friends and my senator, my congressman, Brad Schneider and Dick Durbin. And we're gonna get this done. We're gonna get it done together. So it is so wonderful for us to be here with you today and wish you well and to stand behind you every step of the way until this is done, until we accomplish this goal of reducing gun violence around the country. It is my honor and privilege to introduce two friends, but frankly heroes of mine. We have two survivors. Many of us were at the parade on the 4th of July, but in particular, somebody who and two people who were injured directly by the gun violence. We have my friend Lauren Bennett and also Liz Turnipseed, and it's my honor to bring up Liz Turnipseed to the podium.
Thank you, Representative Morgan, and Senator Durbin, Congressman Schneider, Senator Morrison. It's really lovely to be invited here to talk with all of you today. I, along with my husband Ian and our daughter Sonia, have been Highland Park residents for just a few years. We were attending our first July 4th parade 7 months ago tomorrow. The parade began like any other you might have attended, but then I heard the pop, pop, pop. I went to turn, but it was too late. I was thrown to the ground with a force that I can only describe as a sonic boom. I was momentarily disoriented. I had a ringing in my ear and a pain and a burning in my pelvis. The first thing I tried to do was get up and check on Sonia. I couldn't stand, so instead I tried to roll over and then I saw her stroller. It was knocked over onto its side and I didn't see her or Ian. Then I felt him grab my arm and start to pull. He was huddled behind the bike rack we had been standing next to with Sonia underneath him. He tried to get me up, but I couldn't walk. We looked at each other and we knew that I was shot and he needed to get Sonia out of there. So with bullets flying over our heads, he looked at me and said, "I'll be back for you." And then he ran off with our daughter. Without saying it, we both knew in that moment that her safety was our priority. What he didn't know is that my second priority was that he needed to live. we couldn't leave Sonia without any parents. The next few minutes are fuzzy at best. My memories are fractured, which is not uncommon for victims of trauma. But what I do remember is Ian coming back, trying to move me again, and telling me that Sonia was safe. Eventually, I was transported to Lake Forest Hospital, where later that evening, while watching the news coverage of what happened, I saw an image of 2 officers standing near where I had been laying. There was a large smear of blood on the bricks on the ground. I immediately knew that it was mine, showing the path where Ian tried to drag me out of the scene. I got unbelievably lucky for a shooting victim. The bullet entered over my right side of my pubic bone, bounced around in my pelvis, and exited out the top of the back of my left leg. And it missed every organ, every bone. It was a miracle, to quote my doctors. If it had bounced a different way, entered a millimeter in another direction, then I likely wouldn't be here talking with all of you today. But I still have major muscle, tissue, and nerve damage requiring regular doctor's visits and imaging tests, regular PT, and of course, therapy once a week. My hope is that no other family, no other community has to go through this. We hear about shootings every single day in the news, and while those stories fade fast, being a survivor of gun violence, it never leaves you. I want to thank all of you again today. I want to thank everyone behind me for all of your support and your amazing work that you're all doing. Thank you.
At this time, we will take 5 minutes of questions from the press.
No, all right, I can say.
Congressman Schneider, obviously now the Republicans control the House. How does this complicate efforts for you as far as introducing this, getting this into the House, getting the votes that you need?
It doesn't complicate introducing it, obviously. We're introducing this legislation. We're not bending, not bowed. We're going to continue to do everything we can to try to move this issue forward. The challenge is we need 218 votes. There are 213 Democrats. We need to find at least 5 Republicans who will join us in saying that our children deserve better, our communities deserve better. The legislation we're talking about to have universal background checks has more than 90% support of the nation. The idea of securing our firearms when they are in a store overnight, the store's closed, nobody's there, but make sure that the bad people can't get into that store and take those guns out and harm our families. So we'll continue to have those conversations. We'll continue to look to find those allies, and hopefully we'll get to a place where we can bring it to the floor and pass it through the House.
Do you have any sense if there are Republicans who might go along with this?
Constantly talking to my colleagues and my Republican friends and looking for a way to find that path. It's not going to be easy, but as I said before, we're going to keep trying. I think if you had asked me this time last year, could we pass the Safer Communities Act, I would have said we're going to try and we're going to be hopeful, and we did. What I wish and pray for is that we didn't wait until the next mass tragedy. I don't want to see any more Buffaloes, any more Uvaldes, any more Highland Parks or Monterey Parks. What I want to do is make sure our kids can wake up in the morning and know they can safely go to school, confidently come home, and parents can know that their kids are safe.
Congressman, is safe storage maybe a place that's, less of heated ground where you think there can be some bipartisan action?
I've talked to my colleagues. We've looked for, this is not the first time we've introduced this legislation, and I've had Republican colleagues say, let me look at it. we've not been able to get them over the hump. I'm hopeful that, I'm always hopeful. It's in my genes.
Senator Durbin, if I may, you said that, unfortunately, Highland Park might be a turning point in this debate nationally. I wonder, what have you seen from your colleagues on the other side of the aisle to make you have that hope?
The bill we passed, Safer Communities Act, and I believe that Highland Park had such an impact on that. America was focused on this community, sadly for, as we've heard, the terrible thing that occurred here. But they were determined that people in America could safely go to a 4th of July parade. I mean, that was the bottom line. This was not some extraordinary activity. This is what we all look forward to each year. And I think that really touched a nerve across America. And it inspired a number of Republicans to come forward and agree to some basics, just basics, not really getting into what we need to do to move us in the right direction.
Senator, obviously a lot of the people standing behind you have been to Washington and have met with lawmakers and have lobbied. How do you feel like they've been received there?
Well, I can tell you they've been received well in my office, and Brad's office, and many more like it. God bless them. There's so many people who are gathered here today, not only the victims of 4th of July, but also people who have been victims or the families have victims, and they've dedicated their lives to making this a safer nation. It does make a difference. We can't give up and shrug our shoulders. We have more guns in America than people, and that is a sad reality. And if we can find some areas of common agreement that will at least reduce the likelihood of the misuse of those weapons, each of those is a step in the right direction. Smash and grab out of a gun store, that is so simple to understand. It's the reason you can't take a deodorant from a pharmacy. It's behind a plastic shield. And so it makes eminent sense that when we're talking about a weapon of destruction, there be at least as much care. I'll say one last thing, and that is that Brad has his challenge, being in the minority in the House of Representatives and needing 5 votes and a path for a bill to move forward. We have something called a filibuster, which means that even with a 51-49 majority, we may find a path to the floor, but then we face a 60-vote margin. And that is a tough assignment. We're not going to give up on it, and we're not going to give up on the Senate Judiciary Committee being mindful and responsive to the national sentiment that we can be a safer nation.
We'll take one more question, and after that question, officials are going to be walking to the Memorial Garden out a different door than you to give them a little space to get there. They're just going to pay their respects, but if there's one more question, we're happy to take it.
If I can ask Ms. Turnsi a question?
Sure.
Thank you for sharing your story today. I wonder, why do you feel, you have to do that? It's so important to make people listen. There's been a lot of talk, and clearly a lot of people here agree about what to do, but there's others who still don't.
Sure. So after the shooting, and just a few days afterwards, I had a conversation with my husband where one of the things that we talked about was the fact that I was alive. I had been shot with a MP-15 that ripped through my body, and I could talk about it, and I got really lucky. And unfortunately, when we see these mass shootings, these guns are so deadly. They're weapons of war, they're designed to kill people. And the fact that it didn't kill me, I saw that as almost an opportunity, that I was given a second chance to be able to stand in front of folks and put a real face to what surviving a mass shooting looks like. As well as, like I mentioned, how it just continues. It's not like you go in and you get patched up and you go along with your life. You've got mental health treatment, ongoing physical therapy, ongoing doctor's appointments, thousands upon thousands of dollars of medical bills that can follow you for potentially years, decades. And so that was really why I felt like I needed to put a voice to it, needed to walk the walk, if you will, and support these efforts. I'd always supported them in the past. I think I'm like most Americans who believe and support in common sense gun legislation, things like the Safe Storage Act, seems pretty straightforward to me, that we want to keep guns off of the streets and away from criminals. And it's just, I want to be able to continue to do that.
Thank you for doing it.
I just want to add one other thought. Thank you, Liz, for sharing and for all that you're doing. To everyone here, thank you for all that you do. Liz mentioned that the weapon used in the attack on our community was an M&P 15. Senator mentioned the JR 15. Play on words, junior. M&P has its meaning. It means military and police. There is no reason that these military weapons of war should be in our streets and in our community. And that's why it's so important that we take action to keep our kids safe. Because these weapons are designed for one purpose and one purpose only, to kill and maim as many people as quickly as possible on a battlefield, not in our communities.
Thank you all.